Hello and welcome to my Take 3. Today we're going to be doing a versus battle between the M1 iPad Pro and the M4 iPad Pro and see which one comes out on top. Should you upgrade or should you stay with what you got? Let's find out. Cool, well let's get straight to it, starting with the M1 iPad Pro. So looking at the front of the iPad, you see this massive display, 12.9-inch display, which is micro LED. It's got very punchy colors, very accurate as well with P3 color gamut and 600 nits of brightness. In comparison, you've got the M4, which has a 13-inch display, which now has OLED. This is the first iPad to have OLED, and Apple calls it tandem OLED because they've basically stacked two OLED panels together to increase the brightness. Now it's got 1600 nits of brightness, so it's a lot brighter. In terms of the viewing experience, when I was using the M1, before the M4 even came out, the colors were great. I never had any problems with looking at that display. When the M4 came out, I kind of started to notice that the blacks were much darker, the colors were more punchy. However, I do find personally that the M1 colors are a bit more natural than the M4. Sometimes they do look a bit unnatural on skin tones where it's a bit too punchy. That's down to preference, obviously. Overall, OLED is fantastic, especially for if you're doing color grading work or if you're doing any video editing, that kind of stuff. You're going to really like the OLED display for that. Moving on to one of the things that I think a lot of people found a bit frustrating, which was the camera. So on the M1 iPad, the camera is on the portrait side. So obviously a lot of people do tend to use it in landscape mode, especially if you have it on a case in a stand. The reason why that's frustrating is because when you're on a video call, the camera's to the side, so you're looking at that person, but it looks like your camera, it's off to the side. It doesn't look very professional. Now you've got the M4, which has the same 12 megapixel camera on the landscape side, so it looks, well, it's basically where it should have been the whole time, and now they've finally done that, which is a great addition. They initially did that with the iPad, just the iPad I think it was called, in the previous version, and now they've moved that over to the M4 iPad Pro. Another thing that I found with the M4 iPad was that I actually like to use it outside of the Magic Keyboard case. So with the M4, it's 6.4 millimeters in thickness and 682 grams. It's not the heaviest in the world, but when you're holding it with one hand, it does kind of, after a bit of time, the weight does fatigue your wrist a little bit. With the M4, it is now 5.1 millimeters thin. It's the thinnest Apple product that they've ever released, and it's 579 grams. I've found that because of that weight and that thinness, I actually prefer holding the iPad as an iPad rather than having it in the keyboard case. Obviously for things like viewing content, or if I'm doing work on it or needing to type, yeah, I'll have it in the case. But I do generally kind of actually like using it as just an iPad. I don't have, say for example, like an Apple Pencil to use on the M4. I haven't got that yet. I will get that over time. But it'll be interesting to see what that experience is like where you're holding the iPad outside of the case and using the Apple Pencil on that. The next thing is that due to the thickness of the iPad, I found that the M4 doesn't have as much of a punchy base, and that's obviously due to physics. The M1 being slightly thicker does have a bit more space for the bass to reverberate around, so you do get a bit more of a punchy bass. So sound is your preference, then I'd probably stay with an M1 or an M2. M4 is good. I mean, obviously if you're going to use headphones, it wouldn't matter. But if you do like listening to music or video, watching movies, or just listening to general audio from the iPad itself, then yeah, I would recommend the M1 or M2. They've also improved the charging output of the Magic Keyboard case for the M4. So with the M1 keyboard case, you've got this rounder shape where the charger goes in. So this is just used for charging. You can't use this for any other peripherals. That's only on the iPad's USB-C port. And the keyboard experience was, in my opinion, it was one of the best like typing experiences I've ever had. The trackpad is nice to use. It is a bit small, but overall the keyboard case was just a fantastic kind of addition to the iPad and kind of giving you that versatility between tablet experience and kind of having this almost laptop-like experience. The M4 Magic Keyboard case now has an oval-shaped charging port, which has fast outputs. Also as well, the kind of top layer where the keyboard sits is now aluminium, or aluminum if you're in America, and has a much bigger trackpad, so it's easier for like multi-gestures, which make the whole kind of moving around the iPad OS a lot more fluid. One of the things that I don't like about the new Magic Keyboard case is the metal hinge mechanism on the back. So on the previous model with the M1, it was kind of rubber, and I wasn't really worried about slight wear and tear on it because it looked quite resilient. However, I am a bit worried about getting scratches and it getting slightly damaged. It does look slightly more delicate with the M4 keyboard case, and that's my one concern. So it'd be interesting to see how this holds up over time. But there are other options as well out there if you do prefer other options, such as Logitech's keyboard case, which has like a kickstand on the back. But yeah, I'll probably revisit this over time and see if there's any kind of damages on the back, just because of the way that people open their iPad's keyboard cases. There's no thumb scoop or anything kind of like you would have with the Mac. The other thing as well with the keyboard case is that it's great to use obviously on a table, on a desk, on a sturdy flat surface. However, using it on your lap, doesn't have that lappability, I guess. So as you can see, I've got the M3 MacBook Air here, which has, obviously it's a laptop. As you know, it's very stable because all the weight is at the bottom and the screen is obviously much lighter. So it just sits there very comfortably. But when you're using the iPad, and this goes for the M1 or the M4, when you open it up, because of the weight distribution between the iPad and the actual keyboard itself, they have to try and balance the weight out between them. It kind of topples, so you have to hold it down with your hands or with your wrists almost, to make sure it doesn't fall down, because the second you let go of it, it will just topple over. So just something to keep in mind if you do kind of work in that kind of way. So the next thing is performance. So obviously we've got the M1 and we've got the M4, because that's what we're basically comparing here. How does that compare? Well, obviously the M4 is a lot more powerful than the M1 chip, but how does that translate into everyday use? Well, if you're going to be watching videos, listening to music, playing some basic games, you're not really going to notice much of a difference between these two chips. However, if you're going to be doing things like using more intense tools, or like DaVinci Resolve and doing big video exports, you will notice a difference there in terms of the export times. Also games, Assassin's Creed Mirage has recently come out, and that supports hardware accelerated ray tracing, which the M4 does support. You will definitely notice a performance boost with the M4 when playing AAA game titles that Apple's supporting with these hardware ray tracing accelerations. Another example would be Resident Evil Village and Death Stranded Director's Cut. So just like the iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max with the A17 Pro chip, that both also support hardware ray tracing, accelerated ray tracing, they will support those games. The M4 now supports that. The Max, I think the Max will soon support that because their chips don't actually officially support hardware ray tracing acceleration. But yeah, so if you are into kind of that AAA gaming, or you're getting into more AAA gaming on the Apple side of things, then the M4 would definitely be the way to go. If you are going to be doing kind of more, I guess, standard project work, say you're going to be using Microsoft Suite of apps, you're going to be doing any typing, even Procreate, for example, it works absolutely amazingly on the M1. Now the M1 as a chip was very powerful when it came out. Yes, it's not as powerful as the M4, but it still can do a majority of what you need it to do. It's just there are certain features that obviously Apple is going to be pushing on the M4 side of things, and encouraging developers to upgrade on their apps, because obviously it pushes sales for the M4 iPad. So with all of that said, who would I recommend the M4 iPad to? Well, if you have an M1 or M2 iPad, now I would say the M1 and M2 iPads are pretty much the same because it was such an incremental update between those two. I would say you can stick with those devices. You're not going to notice any major changes with the M4 side of things. Again, like I said, if you're into like those games with hardware ray tracing, then yeah, go with the M4. But again, you're not going to notice huge improvements between the two. If you're on an iPad that is pre-2018, I would definitely recommend the M4. However, if that isn't within your budget, Apple has also released the M2 iPad Air, which I know we haven't spoken about in this video, but it's basically the majority of what the M2 iPad Pro was in an Air package. So if you want to save a bit of money there, you can do that. Or you can also go to resellers and buy an M1 iPad at a reseller for even cheaper. So yeah, so if you have an iPad pre-2018 and you are into like heavy workloads and the iPad is your main workhorse, it's your main device that you use on a day-to-day basis, then yeah, I would definitely recommend the M4. So that's my comparison between the M1 and M4 iPad. Please like, subscribe, and check some links to some related videos down below. And thank you for watching.